Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
Imagine getting pulled over for a broken taillight, right?
Yeah.
And the person running your license plates isn't just a local police officer. It's an analyst for a multinational aerospace corporation.
Which is just a wild concept to wrap your head around.
Right. Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. We are speaking directly to you, our listener, to take you inside the vast and honestly often invisible domestic intelligence network that is operating across the United States right now.
And to do this properly, we've pulled together a really wide-ranging stack of sources.
Yeah, we've got the official DOJ and DHS Fusion Center guidelines.
We also have this fascinating academic paper from Administration and Society on surveillance structures, a major ACLU report raising some serious red flags, and internal documents from the FBI's InfraGard program.
Plus some Wikipedia background on these early terrorism, early warning groups, and a brand new November 2025 congressional bill regarding generative AI.
So the mission for our deep dive today is to explore how exactly law enforcement, private corporations, and federal agencies share information to watch for threats.
We want to see where this system fails, right? Like how it impacts your personal privacy and how it's adapting to futuristic threats like AI.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Is this network basically a giant, highly classified group chat for the FBI, local cops, and mall security, or is it something much more complex?
It is definitely much more complex. I mean, to really understand what this network is today, we have to start with the specific problem it was built to solve.
Right, going back to 9/11.
Yeah, the intelligence failures in 9/11. The whole issue was that agencies failed to connect the dots.
Yeah.
The FBI had some info, the CIA had other info, but they weren't talking.
It's like having a hospital where the radiologist has your x-rays, the pharmacist knows your allergies, and the surgeon is holding the scalpel.
But none of them are legally allowed to look at the same patient chart.
Exactly. Everyone was just hoarding their own intelligence.
So before modern fusion centers existed, there were these things called terrorism, early warning groups, or TEWs.
Right. The Wikipedia background goes into this.
Yeah, our sources highlight the Los Angeles TEW specifically. It was designed by Lieutenant John Sullivan, and it became this incredible blueprint for what they called Operations Intelligence Fusion.
Harvard even recognized it as a top innovation.
Right? They did. Because instead of just reacting to a 911 call, they put public health, fire departments, and local cops in the same room to look at threat data together.
So post 911, the federal government sees this LA model and says, let's take this nationwide.
Exactly. That concept expanded into a national network of 77 officially designated state and regional fusion centers. The whole goal was to blend local, state, and federal law enforcement data.
But this is where I want to push back a little. If the core issue was that the FBI and CIA weren't sharing their toys, how does building 77 new regional centers solve the hoarding problem?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, because aren't you just creating 77 new buckets to drop information into?
You are. And what happened was these centers quickly experienced massive mission creep.
Because they needed to justify their budget.
Exactly. They were built for counterterrorism, but local cops don't deal with international terrorists every Tuesday. So they mutated into an all crimes and all hazards approach.
Meaning they started tracking, like, gang activity or even natural disasters just to keep the lights on?
Right. And because they expanded so much, they realized they couldn't just rely on police officers. They had to look at who actually owns the infrastructure in this country.
Which is corporate America.
Yeah, about 85% of the nation's critical infrastructure is privately owned. The power grids, water plants, telecommunications.
So if there's a cyber threat on a power plant, a local cop walking the beat isn't going to see it.
No, they're totally blind. So they had to bring the private sector into the intelligence fold. And this is where we get into InfraGard.
Okay, yes. The FBI documents on InfraGard. This blew my mind.
It's a massive FBI partnership with the private sector. We are talking over 40,000 members across more than 70 local alliances.
And it covers 16 critical infrastructure sectors.
Right. And these aren't just rank-and-file workers. They want C-suite execs, top IT pros. They have to be U.S. citizens and pass a security risk assessment.
But the DOJ guidelines go even further than that. They explicitly encourage inviting incredibly diverse private entities into these fusion centers.
Oh, yeah. The list is staggering.
It's grocery stores, hospitals, the gaming industry.
Amusement parks, internet service providers.
Yeah.
Even apartment management companies.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You essentially have a neighborhood watch program, but it's run by multinational corporations.
And that's exactly where the ACLU report raises massive red flags, because you are fundamentally blurring the lines between public safety and corporate profit.
Give me an example of that.
Well, the ACLU points out that Boeing actually has an analyst stationed inside the Seattle Fusion Center.
Oh, wow. A private aerospace analyst inside a government intelligence hub.
Yes. And giving corporations access to classified intel risks them using it for business advantages, or even using it against their own competitors under the guise of national security.
So if a private corporation gets access to sensitive government intelligence, who protects the privacy of the ordinary citizen? Like, who protects the customer or the employee from being targeted by their own company without due process?
The short answer, almost nobody. Which leads us to the data avalanche problem, because when you deputize all these private sector folks, the system gets flooded with raw data.
Specifically these SARs, right? Suspicious Activity Report.
Yes, and the criteria for these reports are incredibly vague.
The academic paper talks about this. People are getting flagged for taking pictures or using binoculars.
Sweating in public, refusing hotel-made service. I mean, the list is absurd.
So it's basically giving mall security the power to log people into a national intelligence database based on a gut feeling.
Exactly. And the bias problem here is huge. The sources share statistics from the Mall of America. 65.4% of their suspicious activity reports targeted non-white individuals.
Wow. Over 65%.
Yeah, it just shows how subjective criteria inevitably lead to racial profiling.
But even if we put the profiling aside for a second, does this actually catch terrorists? Are we finding the needle in the haystack?
It's actually making it harder to find the needle. A study looked at 1.3 million 911 calls in Washington, D.C.
Over 1 million calls.
Yeah. And out of all of those, they found only 175 with any potential relation to terrorism.
So the government's approach to finding a needle in a haystack is just aggressively piling on more hay.
That's a great way to put it. And their solution to sifting through all this hay is algorithmic data mining.
Right. Let the computers do the work.
Well, the ACLU report brilliantly points out why data mining fails for terrorism. It works for credit card fraud because banks have millions of fraudulent transactions to train their models on.
But terrorism is, thankfully, way too rare for predictive models to actually learn from.
The math totally proves it. Let's say you have an algorithm that is 99% accurate.
Okay. Let's use a medical analogy here. You have a test that's 99% accurate, which is amazing, right?
Incredible accuracy, yeah.
And you use it to test all 300 million U.S. residents for a disease that only 1,000 people have.
Right.
That 1% error rate means you will falsely diagnose 3 million healthy people.
Exactly. If you use that system to find 1,000 terrorists among 300 million Americans, you falsely flag 3 million innocent people.
So what does this all mean? Does this vast data dragnet actually make us safer, or does it just ensure that analysts are completely buried under reports of innocent tourists taking photos of bridges?
It's definitely the latter. They are drowning in false positives. And to make matters worse, this incredibly flawed data collection is happening within a massive legal gray area.
Yeah, the accountability aspect is wild.
There's this practice called policy shopping. Fusion centers exploit overlapping jurisdictions to avoid oversight.
Like dodging local Freedom of Information Act requests, the FOIA laws.
Right. If a fusion center wants to avoid a strict local privacy law, they might just access data that's hosted on a server in another state.
So they don't technically store it locally, meaning they don't have to hand it over if a citizen requests it?
Exactly. It shields the data from public scrutiny entirely.
It's basically surveillance data laundering.
That's a perfect term for it.
Yeah.
And when private companies get involved in managing this data, the failures are spectacular. Like the Texas Fusion Center.
Oh, the Northrop Grumman contract.
Yeah, they contracted defense giant Northrop Grumman to merge state criminal data with private ChoicePoint consumer dossiers.
Wait, consumer dossiers? Like credit card history and shopping habits?
Yes. They tried to merge that with secure police files. And it failed completely because it wasn't clear who at the private company actually had the legal clearance to access the merged data.
What a mess. And we haven't even mentioned the military involvement yet.
Right. The sources show that National Guard troops and active duty military are physically participating in these domestic centers.
Which directly challenges the Posse Comitatus Act.
Exactly. That's the law preventing the military from acting as a domestic police force.
And the irony of all of this, all these overlapping agencies, private contractors, military guys, is that they still don't actually share information well.
The secrecy irony. Despite being built explicitly to share info, federal agencies still overclassify almost everything.
So local police chiefs are forced to blindly request threat info because the feds refuse to properly declassify the very threats they are supposed to be looking for.
State and local officials complain about this constantly. They're feeding data up the chain, but getting nothing actionable back down.
If the literal mission of a fusion center is information sharing, isn't excessive secrecy an oxymoron? How can a local police chief protect their city if they're kept in the dark?
They can't. And while the system is struggling with this basic human data sharing and privacy issues, the threat landscape is not waiting around for them to fix it.
Which brings us to the brand new legislation, the November 2025 congressional bill.
Right. H.R. 1736, the Generative AI Terrorism Risk Assessment Act. The threat has rapidly evolved into algorithmic warfare.
So how does this change things?
Well, the bill explains that foreign terrorist organizations, groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, they are utilizing generative AI in terrifying new ways.
They're moving past just like regular chat rooms and basic propaganda.
Yeah, they use Gen AI to emulate input data, generating totally synthetic, hyper-realistic images, videos, and audio.
It's like a virus that mutates faster than the human immune system can track.
Exactly. They use it to automate violent extremist messaging, manipulate human emotions, and create these false realities for recruitment.
But the bill mentions something even scarier than propaganda, right? The CBRN threats.
Yes. Chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapons. These groups are using AI to actually enhance their ability to develop these weapons.
Wow. So what does the new act actually do about this?
It mandates that the Department of Homeland Security assess these specific Gen AI threats annually, but crucially, it forces them to share this intelligence down to the state and major urban area fusion centers.
Okay, but think about what we just discussed. If fusion center analysts are already drowning in thousands of useless, false reports about a guy sweating at a hotel,
Yeah.
how on earth is the system equipped to handle a flood of hyper-realistic AI-generated fake threats? Like if a terrorist group drops a fake synthetic video of a bomb threat onto a tip line, an analyst has to treat it as real until proven otherwise.
Exactly. Bad actors can just flood the zone with algorithmic noise. It could totally paralyze the system.
It really is wild when you zoom out. I mean, we started this journey looking at the terrorism early warning groups of Los Angeles, just trying to get the fire department and police to share a room.
And we've watched it mutate into this nationwide convoluted web of public-private surveillance.
It's this ongoing struggle, right, balancing national security because the government legitimately needs to protect private infrastructure with the protection of civil liberties in the face of absolute data overload.
And for you, the listener, it's vital to remember that your everyday actions exist within this web. Shopping at a mall, taking a picture of a building, renting an apartment.
Yeah.
These mundane actions are being evaluated by a complex, overlapping mix of local cops, private corporations, and federal databases. The government says it's necessary to protect the grid. The ACLU says it's a massive threat to your privacy.
And both points are totally valid. It leaves us with a lot to think about, especially as we look to the future.
Definitely.
If foreign terrorists are now using artificial intelligence to generate fake realities, and our own government relies on massive algorithmic data mining to spot anomalies,
Right.
are we approaching a near future where human intuition is entirely removed from the equation?
That's the real question.
Will law enforcement just become algorithms endlessly trying to police other algorithms?
It's a sobering thought to end on.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.